Are you ready to be a leader? If so, are you ready to make the necessary promise to yourself to commit to the work, become consistent, develop discipline, and then yield to reflect on your progress? If so, stay tuned. Jaleesa Dallas here. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to any newbies that are on this journey, and welcome back to those who have been following me for some time. I am excited that you are here as we develop this series from self-leader to people leader. And not that they can't coexist, but sometimes, really all the time, we need to make sure that we make that transition to effectively impact those whom we serve. Here we cultivate courage, and that looks like breaking barriers to our success, bolstering belief for greater confidence, and building brave, bold behaviors to optimize our life, thereby creating belonging internally and externally in community. If you haven't already, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share this with someone you know. So let's get started. Last week, we started this series with 10 plus lessons that I've learned as I am actively and have made already some shifts from being a self-leader to a people leader. And so though that was surface level and a lot of information, I wanted to break some of those down, pair some of them up, and go a little bit deeper. And so that's what we are doing today when we're talking about the leadership promise. With the leadership promise, we're going to talk about what it means to be ready to be a leader, and then the promise that you make to yourself before you even create that lifestyle of leadership to move into. Are you ready for leadership? And so I want to start off with defining leadership. And yes, I'm going to read the Google version, and then I'm going to give you my version. So bear with me. So leadership is not just position of authority, but the ability to effectively guide, inspire, and empower others to achieve a common purpose. I believe it's when our intentions really make positive impact. I also would say that it's a part of our mission. It has a place, people, a pursuit, and provision that comes along with it. I talk about that more specifically when I talk about the purpose tier that I developed in chapter 4 of my book entitled Soul Work: Disrupt Self-Sabotage, Renew Your Mind, and Transform Your Life. And there are 5 different tiers, one of which is your mission. First, you have the mandate for those who are believers to go into the world, make disciples. And then the mission is personalized to you, again, related to your purpose, with a pursuit, people, a place, and provision. So I have some notes here because a good portion of what I'm going to be sharing with you related to being ready for leadership, or just in general being ready for change, is a framework that I developed again in my book entitled Soul Work, chapter 2, Ready for Change. And so we're going to be talking about releasing the old, embracing the new, affirming your truth, disciplining yourself, and yielding for reflection. So those components are necessary when we're talking about being ready for leadership, or just being ready for change in general. And so I'm going to kind of give you an overview of what each of those means, as well as an example of what this could look like in leadership. So bear with me as I'm going to be reading my notes. When I'm talking about releasing the old, I'm talking about releasing our past, the things that didn't go so well for us, because holding on to those things don't really help us. Releasing other people's opinions, because opinions can keep us stuck, whereas facts and truth actually help us to move forward. And then releasing control. If you don't know by now, we can only control ourselves, influence others, and then adapt to our environment. Those are the things that you would need to release in order to effectively start that transition into being ready for leadership. What this can potentially look like is a new team leader recognizes that micromanaging was necessary in past solo projects, but no longer serves in managing people. They release the need to do it all and instead begin delegating trust. The second is embracing the new. For me, this looks like developing a growth mindset. Sometimes Well, a lot of times we need to run towards the new thing. And by run, I mean relearn, the R, unlearn, and then take on new learning. So, with that, that could be applying effort in different ways, planning to make sure things go a lot smoother, monitoring our progress instead of leading with emotion, also being receptive to feedback and being willing to give feedback. Those components are necessary when it comes to shifting from that self leader to people leader and readying ourselves for that change. So, an example in a leadership role is a self leader transitioning into a people leader learns to prioritize coaching over doing, embracing the mindset that success now includes the growth of others, not just personal performance. Again, personal development, professional development is valuable, but leaning into how you can help others in that space as well. For example, mentorship, and as the example provided, coaching is so valuable in this transition. Affirming truth. It is important for you to know who you are, what you do, how you do it. An example for me is really speaking life over my situation, over my circumstances. For example, affirmations. If you didn't know, Go Brave is an alliteration for growth, optimism, boldness, resilience, authenticity, victory, and virtue, and being equipped and purpose to empower others. These are affirmations that I regularly speak in my life. I am optimistic. I am bold. I am resilient. I am authentic. I am victorious. I am virtuous, and I am equipped in my purpose to empower others. So think about how you can affirm truth over your life. An example could be a rising manager defines their leadership values like integrity, equity, and collaboration, and uses them to guide team decisions even when under pressure to conform to a toxic norm. D, for disciplined self, is all about developing routines, habits, behaviors that align with your beliefs, that essentially align with the values that you would develop as you affirm truth over your life. An example, a new supervisor sets boundaries to protect time for one-on-one check-ins, performance feedback, and personal learning, even when schedules get chaotic, because they know consistency builds trust. I have learned a lot about discipline over the past couple of months when I implemented the 75 Hard Challenge. If you don't know what that is, go back a few videos where I explain my journey, my process. Look it up, do a Google search. You'll get a clue of what it is, but it really changed my mindset on being intentional about what's important to me. And in that season, and still, my health and wellness. And so I did my due diligence to become consistent to later be disciplined in my execution. And then lastly, yield to reflection. You're going to want to take time to iterate. Yes, you might be developing and creating, but don't do it so much so where that's all you do and you don't go back to reflect and again to iterate to see how you've grown, what's working, what's not working. An example of this is after a challenging team conflict, a leader takes time to reflect rather than react. They gather input, listen deeply, and commit to growth, not ego, before responding. And so when we're talking about being ready for change or ready for that shift from self-leader to people leader, releasing the old, embracing the new, affirming truth, disciplining yourself, and yielding by way of reflection will help you to transition into that space. Keep in mind that becoming a people leader doesn't necessarily involve a title, but it does involve a promise to do the inner work, a promise to show up as your full and authentic self, a promise to grow, to fail forward. And so I'm going to give you a definition of the promise that I'm speaking of and give you an example of what that looks like. A promise is a declaration or pledge to do or refrain from something. It involves a combination of growth, resilience, authenticity, and virtue. Ultimately, we take ownership of our learning, our failure or redirection, our process to bear truth, and our words. This is where we determine and set our boundaries. I want to share with you what I call a promise statement, one that I think is so valuable when we're talking about shifting or transitioning from being a self-leader to a people leader, because making a promise to ourselves really helps the commitments that we ask others to keep us accountable for and makes them successful, while helping us to be consistent in our practices, while also developing a level of discipline to execute and thereby creating a lifestyle for us. We create a promise statement to navigate our process and to eventually echo our declaration toward change. Our promise helps us to establish a foundation for commitment. I want to extend to you a tool that I have used to develop my promise statement. And you can find that at www.soulworkthebook.com. There you'll find the deep work toolkit that leads you through the process by way of some questions and some examples on how to develop your promise statement, because I believe it's super helpful when we make that promise to ourselves. And for me, I made a promise to be the lived experience of my soul work so that others can experience their own transformation. And with that promise, I was able to communicate that to others to get a level of accountability, because I believe accountability is twofold. It is reinforcing the promise that I made to myself, but also that commitment is external by way of accountability of family, friends, co-workers. And then from there, building a level of practice through consistency in that promise. And then that turns into our ability to execute on that promise by way of discipline. That for us creates a lifestyle for which we can lean into being a people leader. Believe it or not, your leadership journey starts when you say, I'm ready. I am ready to be a leader. Now, most people who find themselves in leadership roles that are not formal don't necessarily want to be seen as a leader, or they don't necessarily want the influence of a leader. Most people who have a call to leadership don't want it. They'd much rather stay on the sidelines. They'd much rather be in the back and not be at the front. But because of who they are, because of their heart, their character, they find themselves being able to influence others. So if this is you, then you've likely been ready for change. You just have to verbalize it and take the authority that comes along with it, but as well as the character. I encourage you to become committed at being the leader that others deserve. With that, that concludes our second video of our series. Again, if you have not seen the first video of where I share those 10+ lessons that I have learned along my journey, go ahead and check that out. And next week, we're going to build on this conversation. I haven't quite yet chosen which ones I'm going to cover, but stay tuned. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, by all means, go ahead and do so. And then also, if you want to subscribe to our weekly newsletter that comes out Mondays at 6 p.m., please do that, because I kind of give a preview of what to expect on Tuesdays, along with other opportunities to connect with me, to collaborate, or have partnerships with me in the different offerings that I provide. But until next time, let your soul work be your best work to a better you. Have a great one.